There you go. All the paint is scraped off, and the result of the operation is that it reveals, well, reasonably dark wood. I don't know what kind of wood it is. It could be maple, but it could also be a light kind of oak. I'm not sure. Now, the thing is that the lid of the gramophone is of a darker wood, a much darker wood than the body of the gramophone, which is peculiar. Now, the top of the gramophone has the same color as the lid, but if you look inside, disregarding this here because this is the horn, okay, if you look inside the drilled holes, the wood does look a little bit lighter. So in any case, the wood has been finished long ago with some sort of, well, I don't know, some sort of tincture that darkened it a little bit before they painted it. But whatever the case may be, the result is that the wood is darker. So I think I'll need to do a sort of a dark painting of it, or varnishing of it. I could try to lighten it a little bit more by applying a second time paint remover, but I don't think that would be entirely successful. So in any case, what I'll do now is give it a quick wipe with a moist rag or something like that, just to clean off the last remnants of the paint remover, and then we'll let the wood dry overnight, and I'll give it a thought as to what I'll do next with the wood. Okay, for the more rusted parts, I'm using a slightly more radical method to get the rust off, and I'm using something fairly dangerous, which is hydrochloric acid mixed with some demineralized water. Okay, and the mix is about 2 full glasses of the water mixed with about half a glass of hydrochloric acid. So, and as you can see, the rust is slowly dissolving, and you can see, if you look carefully, you can see tiny bubbles appearing above the metal parts, yeah, where the rust is being eaten away by the hydrochloric acid. So it is effective, much faster than the navel jelly. However, when you use this method, you really need to keep an eye on it. So you can't leave it on its own, okay? Because if you leave it too long in this kind of mix, let's say, well, you'll end up with completely eaten up, yeah, completely dissolved metal parts. Also remember that you need to use plastic tools and a plastic container, okay? Because acid, hydrochloric acid, will corrode metal. Yeah, I'm using a plastic fork to handle the pieces, and that works fairly well. Um, and I've put the parts, the metal parts, in the bath for say 2 minutes, and after 2 minutes all of the rust is already dissolving. I think 2 or 3 more minutes will completely dissolve all the rust. Once that is done, I will take out the parts and rinse them copiously under running water, and that will be it. Obviously, the more rust there is on a part, the longer it takes for the hydrochloric acid to corrode it away, to eat it away. And the heaviest corroded part is this part here, through which in fact the winding rod is slid to the internal mechanism to wind the spring which powers the mechanism. Now this cap is almost completely derusted. Now I stir from time to time the acid bath to release the gas bubbles from the metal, because they stick to the metal and render the acid less effective. So you need to stir it from time to time. Now there is something interesting which I noticed, and that is that if you look at this part here, you see some faint traces of gilding, which were in fact obscured by the rust, and I think these parts were actually gilded, or at least painted with some gold paint. The same thing with this part here. There are some faint traces of gilding around the edge here. So my guess is these were originally painted gold colored, well, painted or gilded. I don't know which actually, but it means that the parts were not metallic, well, not silver metallic colored, but rather gold colored, which is interesting since the arm of the gramophone is more chrome-like and not gilded. Okay, interesting detail. Now these parts have been sitting in the acid bath for, I'd say, almost an hour now. So eating away the rust has taken quite a bit more time than I thought it would. But I think the end of their stay in the bath is nearing, because let's say 80% of the rust is gone. Yeah, so I stir it from time to time. I rotate the parts so that they get evenly coated by the acid, and well, then I take them out. In fact, I think I will take out the arm already and wash it off copiously with tap water, in fact. Before I can start painting or staining the wood of the gramophone cabinet, I need to give it a small rub down with some sanding paper, which is lying here. I'm using 240 grit, okay, and I'm going to sand all the critical spots so that they are nice and clean. And then I'm going to fill any openings in the wood with some wood paste like this. Now the color is brown, a sort of reddish brown, but it's called Meranti on the tube. So okay, let me rub down the wood first with some sanding paper, and then we'll follow up. While the lid is drying, because I wiped it off with a moist piece of wiping paper, the lid is okay. It just needs to dry, and I repaired a small corner which I had forgotten to repair with wood glue, and I clamped it between some spanners to let the glue cure. Now, while that is going on, I'm going to concentrate on the main part of the cabinet. Now, I have to admit one thing. At first glance, the cabinet looks okay. Yeah, nice cabinet from the first look. Yeah, it looks okay. But once you start looking at the details, like for example the top of a cabinet, you notice that it was probably not a gramophone top of the range. Yeah, because the finition of certain details is really rather crude. Take for example the hole where the speedometer is attached. Okay, if you look at the wood from the side, yeah, you can see the hole is irregular, and it has almost been hacked out of the wood, not drilled, but well, almost as if somebody just took a knife, so to speak, and just hacked the hole out of it. So it's really not very well done. Okay, so my guess is this gramophone was somewhere in the middle range, or perhaps the lower middle range of gramophones. So not, like I just said, top notch. But that's okay. I mean, even nowadays, all the appliances you buy, there are some top-notch ones, which will, of course, cost quite a bit. And then you have the lower end of appliances. And back in the day, it wasn't different. Yeah, it was just the same thing. You had top-notch stuff, which cost you a pretty penny, and then you had the lower end, say for less fortunate people. And this is just such a appliance. Now, unfortunately for me, the top of the gramophone and most of all the front of the gramophone is, let's say, the gramophone's calling card. It really needs to look, well, it needs to look great, or at least very clean, and give the impression of being well finished. One small detail that makes me think that they at least made some effort to make it look a little bit more top of the end is the fact that the top end of, or the top of the gramophone is attached with little screws, wood screws. You can see them all around the edge. Yeah, so it's not simply nailed down, it is screwed down. So that would suggest that they at least tried to make some effort at making it look good. In any case, what I need to do now is sand and clean the whole body of the gramophone, or the gramophone's cabinet, and then I need to decide how we're going to paint it or lacquer it. We'll see. So let's start cleaning first. As you recall, the top of the lid of the gramophone was detaching at certain edges, okay, and what I did was I sprayed some wood glue inside the crevice, or well, the split, let's say, and then I clamped it together with some wood clamps, on both sides. And the wood glue seems to have completely cured and is hard now. So what I'm going to do is to unclamp the lid and see whether I did a good job re-gluing it or not. In any case, after I unclamp it, I will have to make a quick pass with some sandpaper to abrade away the excess glue. So yeah, let's have a look. Yes, and the result is great. There's still a little bit of excess glue I need to sandpaper away, but you see, it's really perfect now. There where the top of the lid was detaching, it is now perfectly attached to the sides of the lid, and that's great. Yeah, it just needs a little bit of finishing. Let's see here. Oh yeah, perfect. Well, okay, so what I need to do to the lid is sand away the excess glue here and then the inside of the lid. And when that is done, we can move on to the lower or main part of the cabinet. So let's get on with it. While sanding the main part of the cabinet, a sliver of wood sprung off the sideboard here, right where I'm pointing. And what I did was I cleaned up the sliver of wood a little bit, not too much, and underneath, of course, what was underneath, I cleaned that as well. Then I dipped both parts with some wood glue, and now I'm clamping them together with a large wood clamp. Okay, I'm not putting a huge amount of pressure on it, just enough to keep it in place, and I'm using a piece of plastic instead of wood to clamp down on it, because I don't want, obviously, this part to stay stuck to the cabinet. If I had used wood to put pressure on the repaired part, then chances are the wood part would have stuck to the cabinet as well. So I'm using plastic instead, which will do just fine. So I sanded the whole cabinet of the gramophone, and it's looking good. It's looking really good. The only thing I need to do, of course, is to clean it off, take away all the dust and grime from the sanding with some moist wiping paper. And once that is done, then we can truly start, well, staining the wood or lacquering it or painting. I haven't decided yet what to do. I'm thinking about making the edges clear and the body of the gramophone dark. Before I start lacquering the wood, I need to clean it. one last time, and I'm using some moist wiping paper and a toothpick to clean out the last dirty spots. It's necessary if you want your paint to keep a good grip on the wooden surface. So what I'm doing is cleaning out the last traces of any dirt out of the wood, and then once that is done, then we start lacquering. Okay, I gave the whole cabinet, the little doors included, a first layer of neutral lacquer, just to impregnate the wood so that it wouldn't crack any longer and it would stick together nicely. And this is the result. It's, like I said, it's neutral. So what I'm going to do next is to give the whole cabinet a layer of reddish tinted lacquer. Let me see. One moment. Yeah. So something like this. They call it Brazilian mahogany color. Okay, so I'm going to give it a warm reddish glow, and I'm going to accentuate all the edges with darker tinted lacquer, you know, just to give it a sort of an accent. Now I also cleaned up the logo which was inside the gramophone, and it cleaned up rather well. You know, now it glows a sort of very faint, well, I would say golden color, but it's really faint, more champagne color. But it's really nice. So I cleaned it with some mild metal polish, and this is what came out of it. So okay, obviously it has a few little dings and scratches and all that, but hey, it's 80 years old, so how would you look after 80 years, you know? So it looks okay. And I'll stick it probably inside the cabinet's lid, but not on the edge as it was originally, but right in the center of it, where I believe it should always have been. Okay, so like I said, I will paint the whole cabinet in a mahogany type of colored lacquer, but I will afterwards accentuate the edges, so this and this and this and the edges of the little doors with some darker stained lacquer, just to accentuate the warm color of the wood. Also, you can tell the horn of the gramophone is also reddish colored wood, so this will also get a layer of mahogany tinted lacquer, just to bring out more its color. I think it will turn out a very nice gramophone indeed. I don't understand quite why they originally painted it nearly black, or maybe I would say a very dark brown tint, unless of course they thought that a dark color would add a little bit more class to it. But I think the wood is so nice, the wood grain is so nice, that it would be better to use a warm color to make the wood glow actually. Alright, I taped the whole gramophone off, and I'm in the process of giving it a darker layer of lacquer on its edges. So this edge here all around, and then this edge here also all around, and then the edge around the speaker. That too gets a darker tint, and the edges of the little doors also get a darker tint. Not a lot darker, but still. So that's what I'm doing right now. And here it is, the cabinet of the gramophone, painted and lacquered. The same thing with the little doors, as you can tell. They too are lacquered, as is the lid of the cabinet. Now I still need to do the top and the sides of the lid and the other side of the doors, but once that is done, then the whole cabinet is painted and lacquered. Now there's one detail I want to show you. As you can tell, the horn was neither painted nor lacquered, and you might wonder why I did not do that. But let's face it, the horn is, you could say, the speaker of the gramophone, and wood vibrates according to the sound that comes out of it. If I lacquer it, then that will change the sound characteristics of the horn. And since the horn was unpainted originally, I decided not to paint it either. So there, that's why I did not lacquer or paint the horn. The weather is nice and dry. There's no wind and little dust in the air, so it's perfect to spray paint or lacquer any metallic parts. You know, even the smallest speck of dust would show up on metal. So in this case, I think it's the ideal moment to lacquer metal parts. So I started lacquering part of the sound arm of the gramophone, more specifically the part which connects up to the pickup head of the gramophone, and I also tried to lacquer the logo shield. Now there's something weird about the metal of the logo shield. I cleaned it with a very mild metal polish, and the more I clean it, the more it starts to have this very mild yellowish, almost champagne-like color. So, and that would suggest to me that the metal might actually be a kind of titanium. Yeah, titanium steel, which would be, well, rare to say the least. Also, I noticed that the lettering inside the the embossing of the shield is actually not black, but a very, very dark kind of blue. Yeah, almost an electric kind of blue. which is very interesting. At first I thought it was black, but it turns out to be blue, as you can see in the picture. So, well, I set up a small sort of chain production line here. So you see I installed temporarily this piece of wood here, from which I can hook stainless steel wire, to which I hang up all the parts to be lacquered. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm cleaning every part with alcohol and water and soap to make sure that there is no dirt on it left. And then I'll hang them up one by one from this pole, let's say, and then lacquer them.